Hey, good to see you all. We've got a nice room here, and I want to thank very much UNCW and Troy in particular for doing this. We also have had some really great sponsors. And if you look in your folder, there's a list of the sponsors in there, so we really are grateful for them. And we're going to have an exciting program, but the one thing we need to do is start and stay on time as much as possible. So, I'm just here to welcome you, turn it over to Dr. Janet McFall. She's right over here. She's a professor of environmental studies at Elon, and she's going to be moderating this first panel. So with that, I've said all I need to say. You may hear from me again once in a while. I'm Tom Hoban, by the way, the executive director of the Cape Fear River Center. Okay, all right. And the panelists are going to introduce themselves. I figure that would be easy.
Okay, some say I don't need a microphone, but I'm going to use it anyway. It comes with being short. So, I'm going to say good morning, and you're going to say good morning back, right? Good morning, Cape Fear River.
Good morning.
Thank you. I'm an upriver person. I live right on the Ha River in the upper Cape Fear, so I am delighted that these downriver folks let us come to be part of today's event. Our first panel, before I start, I also want to say this year the Cape Fear River Assembly did something new. We held 3 forums in the fall, an upper river one, a mid-river one, and a lower river one, and they were well attended and really great participation. We're going to do that again this fall, and I'm going to ask all of you to look for that because, what's that?
I was just saying, the results of all of them are on the website.
Right, the posters and things from the fall are on the website. But we will have forums again this coming fall. So we have our panelists this morning to talk about issues across our basin from a business perspective. And we'd like to enhance and expand the interest and the reason why water quality is important through our forums. So I'm going to ask you to look for our forums. We'll be sending out lots of e-blasts to let you know about them. And I invite all of you to come, give a poster, talk with us, eat some yummy food, and really show your interest in the river basin. So to start our first panel, I'm going to give it a different name. And our first panel, I think, is really good water is good business. Without good water, there is no economic base for North Carolina. And we have our 4 panelists with us this morning to talk about how water is absolutely essential to the business things that they do. I'm going to ask if they will introduce themselves. I'm going to start with a leading sort of general question. And we don't have a formal set of presentations for this first session. It's going to be sort of talking about things that are important to them. I'll be giving them some guiding questions, and we'll see where this conversation goes. Take it away, gentlemen. However long you'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay, all right. I don't have to speak.
The lavalier mics are on the table, so hopefully that will catch all your voices.
My name is Michael Long. I, until February, was an air and water chemist, full-time. But since then, I have abandoned that and gone full-fledged into the cannabis industry, which is new to North Carolina. But it's growing very strong legs in a lot of incredibly interesting ways, far outside of anybody's stigma or misunderstanding of what cannabis has meant historically to this country, at least within the last
And
century.
it's a sustainable crop.
It is certainly a sustainable
Compared to
crop.
corn.
There's a whole lot we can say about it. There's a whole lot of misinformation that's going around about it. But it is my sincere belief that North Carolina and the Southeast is the best place in the nation, if not this hemisphere, for the growth and the development of a cannabis-based industry under any form, specifically because of the access to water resources this part of the nation has. The limits that other parts of the nation have don't prevent them from growing cannabis. Cannabis grows naturally. That's why they call it weed. But it grows naturally as a very healthy, a very useful grain crop. But it also happens that it's actually somebody just yesterday described it as the pig of plants, which I think is appropriate. It's not the prettiest image in the world, but you can use every part of it for a legitimate separate resource. And in order to do that, including its food resources, including its industrial materials resources, and including its pharmaceutical or any medicinal resources, it has a heavy water quality, or a heavy water use requirement aside and beyond that required just for cultivation. We're in a position now, since this is in all respects a new industry, although we're reinventing all the wheels because we're having to rediscover everything about the plant. We have an opportunity to build an industry from the start with the perspective of maintaining the quality of the resources that we use to drive the industry forward. So that's my position, and that's how we're operating.
I'm Sam Cahoon. I'm the owner and executive chef of Savor's Restaurant located at 402 Chestnut Street in Wilmington, downtown Wilmington. We're just a few blocks away from the river, and we're a Latin-inspired restaurant that specializes primarily in seafood, so water quality impacts us greatly.
My name is David Berezoff. I'm a commercial fisherman. I started commercial fishing in 1976. I started working on the Cape Fear River in 1983. I've been fishing in this area since then, except for 3 years I went to Key West to try to straighten out my mind about I was better off here. I've raised 4 children as a commercial fisherman. I served as a Marine Fisheries Commissioner for 7 years. I was on the Coastal Resources Commission for 4 years, and water quality is very important to my industry, and we thrive with good water quality.
Good morning, I'm Daniel Lewis, the president of the Outer Banks Restaurant Association, which represents about 100 restaurant and associate members in the Outer Banks. Have 3 restaurants out there myself, one of which is an oyster bar, and in the past 5 years or so I've had to become somewhat of an expert at oysters, so that's probably how water quality most greatly impacts my business, but obviously we'll get into the details of well beyond oysters.
All right, I'm going to start with a sort of general question, and that is, if you could each address why water quality is important to your specific industries and sectors. And whomever would like to start, jump right in.
All right, I guess we'll start this then. I mean, water is everything. When we think about, in the restaurant industry, everything we serve is mostly water. Whether it be produce, I mean, even beef. I mean, how much water does it take to raise cattle? I mean, water quality is everything. Whether it be, ocean for seafood, or intercoastal, or even groundwater when you're talking about raising plants or livestock. So I mean, yeah, I've already mentioned, with oysters, I mean, water quality is really integral. I mean, we get, oyster farms and oyster waters get shut down, and so that's should be a tell-all right there how important it is. Whether when it goes down to is our food and what we're consuming safe? So yeah.
And to get to that, are there safety standards that you need to address that are water related?
Well, of course, I mean, health codes obviously, focus on that, but, when it comes to oyster and aquaculture, one of my biggest issues with training my clientele is people are still thinking, oh, it's not enough the letter R. It's like, well, that goes back to ancient Roman times, and the R probably should have referred to refrigeration. Lack of refrigeration with bacterial growth. I mean, aquaculture today it's a different world. I mean, you can consume oysters safely year-round, and the aquaculture industry is very well regulated. So yeah, I mean, like I said, mentioned they do get shut down, based on even precautions of water quality. If there's too much fresh water, too much rain.
And as we think about aquaculture, sometimes people have negative connotations about aquaculture, because we hear about the salmon industry, for example. Could you help us think about how aquaculture really helps improve water quality too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, oysters are filter feeders. They filter 50 gallons of water a day. They basically clean the water. There's many of you probably seen that thing on social media, on Facebook, with the 2 30-gallon aquarium tanks with the sound water, one with oysters, one without, and a couple hours the one is clear. So it's filtering all the nutrients.
Our fisher person?
Well, water quality, how important it is to me, it is our livelihood. If we have a bad year of a lot of runoff that closes our waters, it means we don't make any money. And in our shellfish industry, that's clams and oysters. Anybody that's going to start aquaculture, oyster farm, they're dependent on good water quality because they have a lot invested in this. If we work public bottoms, we just go out and harvest the wild stock, whereas they're investing into the industry, and it can make or break them. And it has other effects too that we have to be concerned about, is what it does to our critical habitats, our primary and secondary nursery areas where our juvenile finfish, crabs, and shrimp grow. So there's a lot of ramifications by water quality itself.
Outside of safety, I mean, safety is the first issue you think of, is the product we're serving to our customers safe? But once you have a safe product, you have to have customers to serve to. Wilmington's a tourist town, and we noticed last year with the Gen X being such a big news story that it impacted tourism, and less customers means less money. I think that's the one topic that both sides can kind of agree on, is we thrive on tourism. So when the river that was just voted the best riverfront in America a few years ago is now deemed unsafe, even to a slight standard, that negative connotation just impacts the whole rest of the year. And that's just the river. I can only imagine what happens if and when it gets to the beach level, which is really our big draw, especially this time of year. Wilmington's gotten to a point where we're large enough to go year-round, but a lot of our coastal communities are very seasonal. We only have a few months to make our money, and then the rest of the year we're just kind of scrapping on to the next one. So a bad summer can be disaster for our industry.
So there's two ways that we have to consider water quality and its importance to the cannabis businesses. One of them is the obvious, because we're growing crops, and of course you need clean water, you need access to water that is going to safely grow your crop for you without damaging your soil or anything otherwise. No pun intended, but the rest of it is sort of downstream from us. I mean, it really is. We use the water that we would use to process our material, and it will be released back into the environment in some form. Fortunately, most of what we would have to use is very basic. It's very simple. It's a simple and straightforward set of interactions with water that can be addressed very simply. What the challenge is going to be primarily for the niche market producers, the people that produce for pharmaceutical companies and things like that, we still don't know what the pest pressures that are going to be on cannabis plants in this part of the nation. And that we've already seen, even just over this first grow season, as pests start to emerge, people that have put their whole livelihoods on the line to try to build this industry react with the same amount of fervor. That includes dumping pesticides, experimental pesticides, all sorts of things on their crops that without any consideration whatsoever for the downstream effects, specifically because they're unaware of them. And we all understand that is ubiquitous across anything that is complex, as water quality, very pleasant. But secondarily, you find people who try to determine ways to maximize their production. And when you maximize production, you start creating much more acute problems in local areas. But as the industry starts to get bigger, and we know it will, we start to have to pay more attention to this. It is all downstream from us, and without attention from the public and without the ability to make sense of what the effects of what we might do will be on downstream water quality, it will not get addressed before we get to the point where we can start affecting people's ability to get people to come to the restaurant.
Okay. I've got another question, and you don't have to answer in a linear fashion if you don't want. Whoever wants to answer first, jump right in. What are your biggest concerns about water quality for your industry, for the things that you do?
I'd like to just jump right in on this one. Since I started, when I came to North Carolina, I started shellfishing, was one of the main sources of my income. Since then, I've noticed a progression of lost areas to harvest.
And could you explain that to the audience so that they're clear why you can't harvest in certain areas?
What happens is that every storm event, we have a fecal coliform level. And I'm pretty certain it's 14 parts per million. So that sounds like a lot. I mean, like a little bit in a lot of water, but it's enough to make someone sick. So what happens, we have precautionary measures to shut down that river body during a rain event, just like just recently they shut down the Cape Fear River. So
The
it
whole
is
Cape Fear?
the whole Cape Fear, yes ma'am.
I didn't know that.
Yes, and it occurs quite frequently with every storm event, but there's a level of rainfall that they gauge it by. And so each water body has a different level of rainfall, maybe 2.5 inches, maybe 4 inches, maybe 1.5 inches. over the course of these years, certain areas have been shut down permanently. And what it does is permanent closures, conditional closures, and if it meets criteria, it can be reopened. But it just continually has a high level of fecal coliform in those bodies of water, so they must have it shut down. So what that does, if you have a body of water the length of this table, and progressively it just continues to close down, then all the harvesters only have this little bit to work, and so they overfish the area. So then it causes them to have to go elsewhere to fish, and then it causes more money where they traditionally fished this one water body, and on it goes. And then what happens there, when you diminish the resource, you diminish the ability to sell it. So then the dealers don't have supply, then they usually have to go to something else or go out of business. And that's what has progressively happened in the Cape Fear River area and the Brunswick County area. But there's very few shellfish dealers anymore. Where back in the 80s, the Cape Fear River supplied untold numbers of clams and oysters to the public. And this is one of my concerns, is that it's gonna, unless we do something, it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse until there is no. So then you can't eat from the water, you can't swim in the water, you can't touch the water, and don't you dare look at it. And that's where we're going if we don't do something.
To put this in context, can you identify some specific areas that have been closed? I see, because you're from Brunswick County, right, very close by here, so maybe some of our audience can relate to some specific areas that you might be able to identify.
That's easy. Probably half of the Lockwood Folly River has closed since the 80s. The Elizabeth River, which is a tributary into the Cape Fear River, it's right in front of Southport, it has closed. And right after, I'm not going to say Walmart closed it, but it seemed like when the water's closed, we have a Walmart, we have the South Banks Marina, we got all this new development occurring at the same time. So it's just interesting. We had the Yopon sewer plant on the CP&L Canal that had a leak in there, which I kind of exposed them of it. I happened to have a reporter from the Port Pilot on the boat with me one day, and we noticed that some of the marsh grass was white, which was kind of odd, but there was an upwelling from the retention pond that they have there. And so they fixed that, of course, but all that area, back in that area, is all closed now. And, we're all concerned, and it's hard to make, you can't depend on that certain fishery if it's not available for you.
So does that mean those areas are also closed for aquaculture, for
Oh, most
oyster?
definitely,
Yeah, for
most
oyster,
definitely.
oyster production, for example.
Brunswick County and I think Brunswick County is one of the counties that they do not allow leases to be held by aquaculture entrepreneurs. It's something that has occurred from long ago, and I don't think it'll ever be changed. But then
Is
again,
that a county thing, or is
that-
that
it was something that was put in years ago, and I can't really say that I understand why and when, but we have such limited water space to harvest that we don't want to give up any, even if it's not productive. But from New Hanover County north, it is available to people. You have to meet the water has to meet a certain criteria, the water bottom and all that.
And some of that is based on economic development issues, not water quality issues, where, developers want to develop a new, slew of townhomes and everyone's not in my backyard, they don't want to see an oyster leak sitting
Yeah, this is
on the
something
water.
new that came up, yes.
Yeah.
That's
So that has
correct.
a lot to do with where you can and cannot get an oyster lease.
kind of comes back to what do we consider a beautiful landscape, doesn't it? Perhaps some education about an oyster reef might be a beautiful thing in somebody's backyard if they but knew what it could do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most definitely.
So the other three of you, what are some key concerns for your industries?
Like I said, just the impact on people wanting to come here and wanting to eat the food. We pride ourselves on using locally sourced ingredients, and if those ingredients even have the appearance of being tainted, it doesn't take a lot to deter people from coming to local restaurants, especially when there are a lot of corporate options out there that aren't using locally sourced ingredients. When the Gen X thing happened, it really just hit us hard, not in terms of just food, but just serving water. We had to start outsourcing our water supply, which means now we're recycling more bottles, which means we're throwing away more plastic. And we have people angry at us about it, as if it were our fault, you know, why don't you have reverse osmosis set in, why are you serving us tap water, yada, yada, yada. So just the overall negative connotation for our area because of our water quality, again, when it's been something we prided ourselves on, have advertised, and now we're kind of coming up short on.
How about up at the Outer Banks?
Yeah, I think we have a different set of issues up there. I mean, obviously, we don't have the Gen X issue. And quite honestly, I'm happy to be invited here because I think water quality issues are something that affects us all. And as head of the Ranks Restaurant Association, we have one of the only organized local associations in the state. But I also work with the NCRLA, the State Restaurant and Lodging Association, and trying to coordinate other efforts because water issues affect us all. I reached out to the Asheville Independent Restaurant Association because, you know, they have the Broad French River that has had E. coli issues and other issues out there, and it's going to certainly be affecting the brewers and the restaurants and everybody, and of course tourism. You know, in preparation for this panel, I was looking at you know, of course the BP oil spill and the effect there, and the economic effect is so staggering and it's sometimes not necessary. I mean, the oil spill, obviously, that shut down 3/4 of the, you know, federal water for any harvest of anything. You know, in the Outer Banks last year, we had the guys that were building the new bridge, you know, they cut the power line, it shut down Hatteras Island, okay? What happened? People don't know. They say, oh, Outer Banks is out of power, so people canceled reservations. I mean, even when they didn't have to, most of the Outer Banks was fine. And I think the same thing happens to a degree down here, that the Gen X issue is an issue here, but it needs to be an issue with everyone. Because it's Gen X and Cape Fear today, it might be something in Asheville tomorrow, it might be something in the Outer Banks, you know, next year. So I think we all need to, you know, raise the alarms and band together and focus on anyone's water issues.
How about milk production?
Well, I think my answer to your question is going to be very specific in terms of what we're doing right now. So this is the beginning of year 2. We're planting, or have planted for year 2 right now. So the crop is not going to be enormous because we don't have the facilities to handle a giant crop yet. I expect about 50 tons of material at the end of this year. But I do not think it out of the realm of possibilities to reach 500,000 million, several million tons of material in a few years. And as a result of anticipating how we scale with the fortunate theoretical behavior of an industry like agriculture where things tend to scale linearly, we are trying to answer the issues that are going to emerge on a large scale now. We're already interacting with the Division of Water Quality. We're already working through getting our permitting. We're already working through developing methods to do monitoring correctly. And we're trying to work through how those things can be built into a scalable industry so that the information maintains its quality at all levels of the process. So I'm not really in a position to be so much affected by water quality, but I have to acknowledge that, and I acknowledge readily and early on, that we will be an impact on water quality.
Who do you think is causing what do you know are causing some of the issues that you're dealing with? And are there some public policy discussions that might be fostered either by the Cape Fear River Assembly or by some of our other associated groups that might help with your industry? Anybody can take it. The floor is open.
Yeah, I mean, I think development, everyone seems to want economic development, but they don't look at the consequences for that development. And I will totally deviate from the topic here and say, in the Outer Banks, one of our big issues, or one of my big issues with development is that, you know, we're so gung-ho on economic development, we approve a, you know, $100,000 square foot supermarket to come in, and, you know, space is one thing we're gonna pay for, but one of our biggest issues out there, and I'm sure probably to a degree here, is workforce. There's just not enough workforce between the status of, you know, the immigration status and, you know, the number of immigrant workers or seasonal workers that are available. But to me, part of the development, economic development, is that when somebody wants to come in and develop a property for commercial use or whatnot, just like they would go through the regulation of, like, okay, space, lot coverage, parking, you know, the infrastructure part, the human part should be considered as well. As far as, like, where are you gonna get your staff? Or, you know, you're gonna need 80 to 100 people to run this place. where are they gonna live? We don't have available housing. So I think, you know, I'm using that as an analogy, but whether it be housing or whether it be wastewater or whatnot. You know, so for example, even, you know, being upstream with, you know, your development, your, you know, part of the economic development, what are the ramifications of what you're doing? You know, are there negative impacts? So, you know, going back to, you know, I didn't really answer your question about the salmon farming versus oyster farming in terms of impacts. You know, the salmon farming really did come to light because of the negative impacts, because of the dead zones that it was creating underneath in the ocean waters. You know, oyster farming is completely opposite. It's actually a gain. You know, the oysters are actually, the more oysters you put in the water, the better. In fact, just from a ecological standpoint, I only carry farmed oysters for the most part, with rare exception. I don't get any wild ones out of the Pamlico anymore, even though they're available, they're cheap. I don't get any out of the Chesapeake. It's like leave the wild ones in and support people that are actually wanting to put more in the water.
One of the things about water pollution that we have to look at, it's very complex. There's many different things that cause pollution. We have fertilizers that cause algae blooms. We have pesticides. We have pharmaceuticals that a lot of people don't even realize what negative effects it has on our sea life. We have, you know, siltation that comes in and covers over vast areas and changes the flow of our waters. Something that Mike Mallon, I saw something by him in there. I remember one of his statements long ago was, dilution is the solution. Well, it makes a little bit of sense in that because we've made so many man-made channels in our waterways and stuff, but they have adverse effect on our natural creeks and stuff where they close off the mouths of them, where the water doesn't flow in and out. So it doesn't pull that negative pollution that's up in there. It kind of contains it, and so it makes that unavailable for the fishermen, and it doesn't make it safe for them to harvest fish in there. So first of all, you got to address that. We have to have smart construction on the coastline. We have to make everybody aware of what we're doing to our coastal waters by how we maintain our lawns and how our sewage is treated, and is it doing a good enough job for the discharge to be entering our water system. So it's very complex, and the knowledge and I guess the information that we have to give out to people and let them know that we're all stewards of what we must do to take care of our waters.
I think they both touched on a large amount of it. It's a little bit everywhere. It comes from many different places. As he said earlier, everybody's always looking for new development. And I think a big problem is the lack of keeping the old development up to standards. When you go to Riceville Beach and then it goes to Waterway, there's a lot of old buildings that have been there a long time. And I can tell you there's waste lines that still they're grandfathered in. And so they run directly in the water. It doesn't matter if you're pouring bleach down it, it doesn't matter if you're putting grease down it. It goes directly in and they get away with it because it's grandfathered in, like I said. And there's no doubt that it would cost a lot of money to fix this problem, but it's money that should be spent. And it's something I think just gets overlooked because everybody's more worried about new development as opposed to just updating what's already there.
Where do you get your information about water quality or environmental quality?
My dad.
It's good to have one of those. My daughters say the same thing, ask Mom.
His dad.
Well, I haven't actually officially met your dad, but I'm assuming he's quite an authority. But, to me, I think it's like where do you get your news? You know, if you're only getting your news from Fox News, then you have a certain perspective. If you only get it from CSNBC, same deal. I think that it's important to get a broad spectrum. You know, as far as news, BBC probably like most independent, you know, out there, or certainly one of them. But just getting aside, you need to get a broad spectrum. I mean, as far as my information, I think I work with the North Carolina Coastal Federation a lot with especially with their oyster restoration efforts. So they have a tremendous amount of research. Marine Studies Institute, you know, sea grants. but also fishermen, people that are actually on the water. I mean, it's important. I have, I'm not in a position to actually be on the docks myself, every day, but I have a guy that basically shops the docks with me. He also works on boats, so he's my pulse on what's going on the water. It's like, what's, where are the fish, or where aren't the fish, and what's the status of the water. And I swear to God, I always learn something from this guy every time I talk to him. It's like, going, it's like, oh yeah, well, we can do this, there's all of a sudden the fish do this, and it's like, you just, some of it, you gotta consider the source and consider, it's like, well, is that really true or not? I think it is holding on to all of us to actually be skeptical of what we hear, especially in this day of social media where, hey, it's on social media, it must be true, right?
So, I think what you said can be categorized in two separate ways. One of them is that you can get information that comes into where you live and interact and where things affect you, and then information that is created and received in that region. And they're two completely different things. One, who here thinks you can actually rely on what information you get through your computer? It's almost impossible to actually convince yourself that what you're reading itself is not backed by some agenda or some misinformation or some hyperbole, and it does happen. I mean, it's not, we're not making this up. But if the problem, the way I see it, is that the effect is accumulative, so people try to treat an accumulative effect with macroeconomic type decisions. So you make decisions that have a sweeping effect across an entire sector or geographic region or whatnot, that when in reality, the information necessary to address the problem exists with the people that can read the willow trees, for example, or the person who knows what, this place has high fecal coliform, the fish are coming out like this, the seagrass looks like this.
Where the marsh isn't recharging.
That's right, that's correct. It's, as soon as the information, it almost like it gets above a certain threshold and it can no longer be acted on effectively, or at least effectively enough without damaging more than it should in reacting to something that is, has to be.
Dave, you're about to say something.
Yeah, I'm about to jump out of the seat.
I can tell.
Yeah, the Division of Marine Fisheries has a proclamation authority to open and close waters. They post this on their site, so you can find out what has recently closed, what has recently reopened, and they'll have a backlog where you could review from the past. So it's available for everybody to see what areas have been opened and closed. So, I mean, and that's public information, so you can get it right there. And, I'm very well aware of it because I know what to do and what not to do.
And as far as that goes, I mean, you have to be like, going back to considering the source and delving into the news. It's like, you might hear that, for example, I think, I forget what storm it was 2 years ago or so, it shut down most of the waters in the Pampa Sound for shellfish harvest for 3 weeks. Okay, it was, I think it was, it wasn't because the water was bad for 3 weeks. It's because of lack of funding. For example, Dare County hasn't had a water testing facility
Say that
for
a
several
little
years.
louder, would you please?
Dare County hasn't had a water testing facility, and I will, I'm not getting into politics. I'm not a big fan of our present representative. She just lost her primary, but surprisingly enough, she just introduced a bill to try to get that money in the budget back, so that we have, 5 years ago we only had one local oyster farm. Now we have 7. So now it's not one farm being affected if they can't get their water inspected in a timely manner and basically being put out of business for 3 weeks. It's 7. So it's a growing issue. So going back to how that reads in the news, it's like, oh, the Aramaic waters were shut down for 3 weeks. No, well, yeah, they were because we didn't have any money in the budget to get it tested. So, again, reading into the story into the details.
To help put this in context a little bit, can you give me some idea of how much it would take to start an oyster aquaculture business?
Probably more in tune with that than I am.
Well, I do have friends, and it's very expensive, but you have to obtain your lease. There's a process that you gotta go through Marine Fisheries to get that, to where you can lease the water bottom. And then you have water column leases that they utilize, the upper part where they use rafts and they float the oysters or clams or whatever. And then you have to go out and buy the seedlings or spat, and then you plant them. And then the security of your area, the cages that you put them in, the grow out bags. I mean, you can look it up online in detail what they have to do. As far as the monetary amount, I'm not familiar with, but
It sounds like a lot of money. It's
It
a
is.
substantial
I mean,
investment.
$20,000 seems to be a good starting point, I'd say, but based on what I hear, but the industry in North Carolina has grown tremendously, and some of that in a couple of years ago, it was actually our former representative that introduced legislation to kind of cut the red tape out of getting an aquaculture lease. To put it in perspective, in 2 years, I think 2 years ago, the number of water column leases was less than 20. This past year, in 2017, I believe it was 86. So the red tape is alleviated tremendously, so the aquaculture industry is only going to continue to grow. So, water quality issues, whether it be testing or leasing or the economic impacts with the old not in my backyard issues, all of these things are,
So it's sounding like it may
integrated.
be more cost effective to spend some money on water quality and supporting aquaculture than perhaps a new Apple headquarters.
Remember, it's a plus on game in terms of the more oysters you put in, the better water quality we will have.
And it doesn't, they really don't affect the wild stock as far as competition. You either want to buy one or the other. I was nailing him a little bit because he says he only buys farm raised, but I understand why. They're a consistent supply and uniform, so you get the same thing over,
Yeah, and the wild stock has not been what it was 5 years, even 5 years ago.
That's right, and you can't depend on it lots of times because of weather conditions or whatever else, and they can harvest at a reasonable rate farming. I understand both avenues of it, so I have no problem with it. Yeah, they are, aren't they?
What kind of information would be helpful for you to understand, to plan for and to manage some of these water quality issues?
That's a good question.
What could be helpful for these kinds of economic development?
I think just knowing more about the closures, the reasons why, and the timeline of what's being done. For example, if I didn't have these relationships with all my oyster farmers, I would have never known about, why it took 3 weeks to reopen even the first farm,
So broader channels broader platforms for communication of validated information.
One of the things that occurs when public supply of seafood is not available, we go elsewhere to get it. And when you get, say, foreign imports or something from another state, the consumer never sees the impact of what's happening locally. And I don't, because a restaurant has to operate, a seafood market has to operate. But if you designate through these catch groups that we have now, that this is, say, Brunswick Catch
So
or
say, you need a
Carteret
big sign that
County.
says Brunswick Catch.
Yeah, so you want to support local seafood, wild, fresh, and local, as opposed to imports, but it's available there if you want to buy it, import when this is not available. And let people know why it's not available, is because we have a shutdown on our local shellfish, or we have a spill of some sort that made it so that we can't harvest any finfish, or the shrimp aren't available there, or crabs aren't available. There's many things that we need to promote as we sell our seafood in our restaurants and in our markets.
And I actually welcome that opportunity, like what after the Matthew thing happened and I couldn't get the double shoal oysters from Oak Grove for like 3 weeks, I had customers saying, hey, why? I'm like, well, this is the reason why. It gives you the opportunity for the teachable moment, whether it be, when you ask about how important water quality is, from the consumer standpoint, I think it's a real hit, unless it directly affects them. I brought my little prop here today because visiting Wilmington. I stopped in last night to see my friend Keith Rose at the Catch restaurant and talking with the crew there. It's like, how has the genetics thing affected the restaurant? Are you seeing people not refuse tap water or increase sales in bottled water? When I was at the getting out of the hotel this morning, what was they going to fill that with? It's like what are these, I think a lot of these issues are hidden until it affects the consumer directly. I belong to another chef organization called the Chefs Collaborative, which their tagline is change menus, change lives. And our thing is like, hey, you shouldn't necessarily be serving, there's no reason why ahi tuna has to be on every menu in every state in the union. If it's whether it be an overfishing thing or an availability thing, I think as restaurateurs, we're more focusing on what's available here and now, and educating our clientele that this is what we're serving. And, you know, I'm sorry if you want, you know, asparagus, I'm sorry, it's November, we're not serving. But I tell you what, when the asparagus season is running in eastern North Carolina, that's the best asparagus in the world.
Yes, it is, and be ready for asparagus and everything.
Exactly.
Now, what type of information would I like to receive about water quality? I'll answer that in a very general sense for people that are involved in farming or in cannabis work in general. The people that I work with, I mean, they care about water quality, surely. Surely they do. But it's a complex issue, and it's hard to make sense of it. And it would be great to receive information that what you're doing is in fact okay. You don't get, you only find out when something's going wrong, when something's going to get wrong, and at that point, you're already out of control because the message is out. And you yourself don't know how to respond to it because you haven't been informed and you're not aware of what it is you might be doing that might be causing that problem. And, I mean,
So you don't have the tools for effective adaptive management.
you don't have the tools for adaptive management, and you haven't, yeah, that's actually very well put. Adaptive management.
Say something once in a while. What would you, who here is involved in politics at any level? I know we have some, county commissioner, city council, state representative, school board. We've got a, okay.
Oh, yeah, man. I run every 4 years.
Okay. Soil and water board, yes. Okay, what would you like to say, all of you, respective of public policy? Because we often hear that there's a tension between environmental quality and environmental protection and economic development. And those of us who are engaged in this discussion know that that's a false argument, a false tension. So how would you like, what would you like to say to people who are voters in the upcoming election?
Paperwork is a big hurdle,
Okay,
and it dissuades a lot of people from doing what they should do to develop their economic sector or whatever they're involved in appropriately, so that it is interfaced with both the public and the government at the same time.
so instead of indiscriminate paperwork discarding, what information would be valuable for a business person in agriculture to collect?
For transmission to the public.
Whatever.
I don't know if I can answer that question.
You think about it, and I'll ask our other panelists. What would help with a broader policy discussion to help deal with this supposed tension?
I'll preface my comments with, as far as politically, I am an independent. But it was interesting, the last presidential election, I was actually up on the Eastern Shore visiting the Oyster Farm. I voted early, so I was on that Tuesday, I was up on the Eastern Shore, in which was obviously a very red territory. So fast forward to today, and you have crowd houses up there shutting down because the Eastern Shore has a need of about 88,000, they put in applications for 88,000 HB2 visas, H2B visas for immigrant workers to do the crab picking. There were only 50,000 allotted. So the administration decided to work that on a lottery basis. So some houses got their workers, some houses got none. Some of those houses will be shut down and mostly shut down forever. So I think from a political standpoint, I think education is one thing. Probably the most important thing is understand, the policy and the ramifications of those policies. And people have to stop voting against their own best self-interest.
Was there an issue at all of being able to supply the market, that there was enough crab harvest to supply?
Well,
the
this
market?
is ongoing, so I think what's gonna happen is that the domestic market is already shooting up in price. So, you know, I mean, you know, crab meat, yeah, it's a commodity, so it's a global commodity. I mean, most of it's, you know, well, most of us know that 3/4 of our seafood is imported. Same thing with crab meat, you know, most of the restaurants, I would imagine that most of the restaurants that, you know, local seafood, you know, restaurants in Wilmington are probably serving imported crab. And honestly, for about a month, for about the past month, I had to get Mexican, because, you know, there was nothing domestic available. But now that the crab houses are opening, the prices are like, they're $10 higher a pound than they were last year.
Phew.
I mean, and part of that is because there's very few houses operating right now. But, you know, so makes it very challenging for operators like, you know, like Samurai to want to stick to our guns and say, hey, we're gonna do nothing but local fresh seafood, when the local crab meat costs $10 more than the stuff you can get from Indonesia.
What can we do to promote Brunswick Catch so that we have more viable fisher people in Brunswick County and New Hanover and throughout the North Carolina coast?
It's a struggle right now. A lot of fishermen are falling by the wayside. It's easier to you know, basically get a labor job or some other means of income than it is to work on the water, being so frustrated all the time at the high expense of equipment, the inability to have water access. Fortunately, the state has built several new water accesses, but they're getting very crowded. A lot of the old fish houses are being sold off, and developments are being put there, or a new marina. So it's not, everything's not geared towards the working waterfront like it used to be for the commercial fishermen. So we have to take a stance somewhere along the line and say, look, we need this. And there are groups and interested people trying to do this and achieve that. My biggest thing is that we all have to try to effectively produce a quality of life, a good quality of life on our coastal waters for everybody. And then everybody be conscious of what we need to do to preserve that.
And I think everyone does value local seafood. And if people were eating a fish on their plate, thinking it was local, but in fact it was from Thailand, that's an
It's
issue.
frustrating, yes.
Okay, Sam, you've got a minute, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up.
What question would you like me?
Come on, anything you want. We've got 5 minutes, and then we turn the floor over.
So, you know, to the politicians, obviously keep the water clean, and let's do what we need to do that, because it feeds both sides of the spectrum. In terms of information that's useful, just communication of the information. Today, I was asking my fishmonger, you know, why can't I get flounder? Weather's a big part of it. Turtles are a big part of it. They shut down a lot of fishing because the turtles are coming in. They don't want to risk it. So now it's only giggers getting it, and the fish dealers have to decide whether they sell it at a higher retail price to everyday people, or they sell it at a lower bulk price to restaurants. And obviously they're going to pick selling it to customers. So now I can't sell it, and that just puts us restaurants in the position of offering different things. One of our goals has always been to use the less common fish. Like you said, there doesn't need to be tuna on every single menu. So educating to the public that triggerfish is great, sheep's head's great. You know, red drums are state fish, and a lot of people won't try it for whatever reason. So just all around communication of information. It's good to have it, but if nobody knows about it, there's really no point.
I am making a note to eat red drum.
Black drum too.
Yeah. Actually, made a good comeback, yeah.
So, summary statement, we've got about 3 minutes.
I'll start. We're gonna use a lot of water, but we're starting early to make sure that we use it responsibly. And if at any point we start to have an impact downstream, we need to know as soon as it begins. We don't wanna wait till it accumulates and becomes a problem
It shuts you down.
that shuts anybody down.
We're a coastal community. Take care of our coast, our water. It impacts all of us, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, definitely this meeting is a start. It's just drawing in the people that are not, the non-knowing, and what they can do to help, and then be conscious of what they do. You know, whether it be in the yards, you know, farming, you know, what we need to develop in our sewer systems to handle some of the pharmaceuticals. And I thank you.
Silence is consent. I found myself getting much more politically active in the past couple of years for various issues, whether it be offshore drilling issues or things that, you know, would directly impact my business and my livelihood. If you don't speak up, then you're allowing it to happen. I was very surprised in the past 2 years I've had the opportunity to, you know, between the Coastal Federation and the Government Affairs Committee with the State Restaurant Association, interact with our legislators. They will listen. They, you know, it's a part of the ugliness of politics is the money part, which, you know, I don't want to get involved in. But if you show up at their door and make the phone calls, they will listen. So I think that's, I mean, we can all sit here and talk about the issues here, but it's, as far as what's going on here with Cape Fear River, it's Jones Street and Raleigh what matters.
I second that.
Get on the phone, go to Raleigh, meet your folks.
Be polite.
So in summary, good water is good business. Thank our panel this morning, and I think we're ready for a break.